Hello everyone, greetings from the 7th of Nero. AJ here, continuing the brief primer on economics in the Iron Kingdoms and wider Immoren, where applicable. Like the previous installment, there's a fair degree of assumption, because while a lot of the following content is detailed in various sources, it is only by way of mention rather than detail, so a lot of the inferences as provided here are personal interpretation with a fair measure of what I consider to be logical implications based on the nature of the world these coins trade hands in. As concerns the value of various coinages and currencies, parallels are drawn from the real-world economic dynamic, and detail is somewhat shoehorned onto in-world equivalents, since the rates of exchange and inflation which real legal tender experience are both awkward to portray in an RPG in what might be considered a fun in apostrophes manner, but also difficult to accurately write thanks to the dynamic and continuous change they undergo. As such, this is probably one of the few occasions in which what's presented here may well be considered simultaneously canonical and non-canonical, in a manner of speaking. Consequently, what follows is less a presentation of lore as intended by the writers, but more a personal supplement for options when role-playing encounters where such mundane affairs as money and currency exchange are relevant, however few and far between they may be. Not all peoples of Immoren use money, coins, and currency, and depending on who you ask, legal tender is the mark of civility. Though that is a discussion which, as one of those few who has encountered a giant before, I won't delve into particularly deeply. Those who do not use coins get by thanks to traditions of bartering, which may veer towards concepts similar to ownership by the strong. But no matter, that is a topic for another discussion. There isn't really anything in the world quite like a coin. It is almost like magic in how a fancy circular metal disc or three can open doors or close them, persuade one individual and threaten another, smoothen the transition of ownership or make it more difficult, and it can buy silence or a great many words, whether it be a lie or a truth. Less poetically, it is difficult to say how much legal tender changes hands on a daily basis, or in which industries it does so the most. More pertinently to the adventurer, traveller and mercenary, their daily lives invariably revolve around earning and spending copious amounts of it. Though how foolishly or wisely one goes about their cycle of money is another matter entirely. For many, acquiring and spending coin is straightforward enough, but arranging to acquire and spend the right coin is somewhat more difficult. Nothing annoys a Cadoran innkeeper more than seeing a Signoran coin drop onto their bar to pay for a shot of Viatka, or vice versa for a Signoran landlord's beer. One need not consider the reaction to a credit chit moulded in the Protectorate. Anyway, exchange houses are there for those who know where to look for them, and most reputable ones don't try to fleece their customers too much. Though amusingly enough, more care needs to be taken with Ordic establishments than any other, since the Bandit King's subjects are decidedly more devious in their way towards financial self-service. At least with Laerle's banks, you know the high probability of a lack of funds on site. Thanks to Cadoran and Sulmenite invasions and subsequent activities, their financial institutions may be forgiven for being excessively cautious with withdrawals, particularly given the chance of fraudulent transactions in a nation which has seen thousands of foreign soldiers and mercenaries go back and forth plundering and spending coin with abandon. Even now, with Lael being the destination and new home for many refugees who fled the Infernals and the Claiming, the Laerle state and its government hold a certain measure of fear regarding the economy's instability, and that of the new minted run of the gold bust. And nothing need be said about quirks, where currency may be interpreted to be souls and corpses just as much as gold and silver coins. To begin with, the gold and silver standards which dictate a lot of the domestic and international monetary dynamic varies wildly from state to state, and even within states. The Signoran crown is perhaps the most consistent, with a fixed and state-enforced quantity of gold and silver content in all centrally minted coins. Cadoran currency, however, is quite the opposite, wherein the Coltino, in an effort to one-up Signor, carries a higher proportion of gold than the crown, even if, ironically, the buying power in their respective states of circulation is more or less the same. An even greater irony is that in terms of absolute value, the relative stability of the two nations' economies means the crown is actually worth more than the Coltina in the eyes of international traders. Aware of this, the Cadoran treasury highly regulates and controls said circulation, doing their best to ensure as little of it makes its way across the border. Conversely, the silver Denesca is comparable, if still consistently inferior, to the Signoran equivalent, the shield. At least in terms of silver content, though depending on year and location of minting, it can be somewhat lower than state-mandated values. It takes a talented official to be able to tell the difference between such coins. But this has long been an issue in Cador, for the coins currently used replace the old standards of the copper horn, silver hoof, gold talon, and platinum fang, which all saw continuous devaluation when traded overseas. Still, Signar has not been immune to similar problems, including counterfeit coins, something which led to the refusal and subsequent removal from circulation of the groat, a coin equal in value to 2.5 shields. Elsewhere, Ordic, gold and silver standards are also quite different, if in an entirely distinct manner. While the Ords do have their own sovereign currency based around the gold royal and the silver galleon, Five Fingers, Caradova, Berk and similar places are awash with all manner of coinage from throughout Immoren, ill-gotten gains which the pirates of the Shard Isles find most familiar. It is here where money may find the most reasonable rate of exchange for one's money, even if you're just as likely to see your coins stolen as fairly exchanged. Unsurprisingly, standards are quite lax for Ordic legal tender, and depending on where one goes in the Iron Kingdoms, requests to handle it can be met with reactions from establishments who accept it, ranging from doing so only at a greatly increased price relative to the coin's value, to complete refusal to accept it at all. Laerle's coins received much the same reaction, if for different reasons as indicated earlier. When Cador invaded, they naturally took over and plundered banks and moneylenders. While there was a time when Laerle's and Cadoran coins were used side by side, imperial policies eventually made it impossible for holders of Laerle's currency to be remunerated for its value, overseas or otherwise. This quickly led to the absolute refusal to accept or exchange the gold bust and keep abroad, despite their once regular circulation. Cador's implementation of their own currency in occupied Lael spelled the spiral of devaluation for the native coinage, along with cessation of minting the coins altogether. Those old Glabrin-era coins not melted down for reminting bearing Queen Caitlyn's image, as in current usage, are something of a novelty these days. Lastly are the heavier Rulic coins, the gold gul and silver ul, which are perhaps the most trustworthy throughout the Iron Kingdoms for money exchange purposes, due to the exacting standards the dwarves of Rule place on their craft, which extends to minting, and the fact Cadorans and Signarans distrust each other a great deal more than they would ever distrust a Rulic. However, since the prevalence of Rulic coinage throughout the Iron Kingdoms is much lower than any of its counterparts, and despite its status as a trustworthy currency among those who know of it, the international trading standard remains the Signaran crown and shield, much to their northern rivals' chagrin, even though Cadoran financial commentators find it difficult to deny their currency has a mixed reputation and unpredictable dynamic overseas. A quick note regarding more valuable coins should be added insomuch many nations mint platinum standard coins which see various degrees of general use, if, understandably, far less than their companion gold and especially silver coins. Among the human states, only Ord never made any attempt to produce a platinum standard. Nevertheless, the Signaran Tower, Cadoran Platinavi, and Rulic Dugul are all highly valued by their governments and minting establishments, and their circulation is often artificially limited by controlling just how much of them are made available. Indeed, most circulation is between banks and other financial establishments to serve as an intermediary when large amounts of gold are impractical to transport. The exception is the modern Laerle's Ascendant, which was produced in such low quantities these coins are more collector's items than anything else, due to the extensive variety of highly detailed and symbolic Moran iconography on them, hence the name of the coin. But what of the Protectorate? When that state was founded, the Solmenites were originally barred from minting their own currency. Combined with their outward attitudes towards material extravagance and wealth, what resulted was a strange sort of compromise for domestically circulated legal tender which applied Signaran values to what was charitably labelled as a set of coins, which were made of clay. The stave and mark would serve as analogous gold and silver coins respectively, and made distinct by a variety of symbols in the moulds, while blocks of staves, called decastaves, could be broken down into quantities of staves to use at an individual's convenience. Traders who ventured abroad, aware that such coins were of absolutely no value away from the Protectorate's borders, beyond the novelty of a piece of clay with monetary worth, were obliged to bring precious gems or other objectively high-value goods to serve as tender in the place of coin. Due to distrust among many Westerners for the Solmenites, such practice was also necessary, since it was generally more difficult for them to acquire foreign letters of credit, or banknotes. However, with the dissolution of the Protectorate in the aftermath of the claiming, the stave has long since been abandoned, precisely due to its lack of real value. So trade in that place is now conducted by bartering, or using alternative gold or silver standard coins sourced from wherever people can find them. That said, marks and staves have some value for the more foolish trinket collectors, and zealous Menites who harbour romantic views about the Protectorate's past, while adventurers lucky enough to find decastaves intact can sell them on to the right interested parties for far more than what they were ever truly worth. The last currency of note with minted coinage is the Iosin Nios, with the analogous silver standard the Lai, though I mean minted in a rather loose sense of the word. As has been mentioned before, Iocen coins are more a work of artistic craftsmanship than intentionally produced pieces of legal tender, even more so than the Laerlys Ascendant, which was at least minted with some measure of wider general circulation in mind. Iocen coins were, in keeping with the consulate court's general view to international diplomacy, never meant for exchange overseas for any reason or return. Trade would be done using locally sourced precious gems or foreign currency, the Signoran crown being a convenient intermediary, even if it was always difficult for merchants, whether Iocen or Laerlys for the most part, to assess its equivalent value against the Nios, since the equivalent for counting houses has never existed within the Mistvow. Nevertheless, Iocen currency has always been a paradox among the Iron Kingdoms as far as physical coins are concerned. Because of how they are made, they have a lower weight in both gold and silver respectively than almost any of their equivalents elsewhere in the Iron Kingdoms, reputable or otherwise, yet often carry a far higher value in trade than any other currency. This was and is due to the artisanal nature of each coin, many of which have embedded gem shards in the Nios, or variously coloured crystal fragments, as in the Lie. Taken to its logical extreme is the platinum glyos, which have detailed designs etched into the embedded and intricately worked precious stone. Such is the nature of Iocen coins, whether in Ios proper, the Elven exclaves, or Western Immoren at large. A standard copper coin does not exist. But more to the point, the value of the coinage lay almost entirely in being works of fine art. This is the case even more so nowadays, thanks to the fracturing of our state. Among the pockets of Ios scattered throughout the borderlands, available coinage is limited to the exclaves, which quickly adopted to using foreign coins, particularly Rulic money, such as at Frostbracken, due to the need to use any metalworking knowledge and similar craft for more pressing tasks. Thus it should come as little surprise that our own currency is kept for sentimental and familial reasons, at best exchanged reluctantly amongst others of elven kind, and unwillingly with anyone else. I acquire them where I can while travelling the Iron Kingdoms, finding history in each one, for a story of a coin's origin can be found in the text and designs on them. These can almost always be ascribed to specific craftsmen, not just when and where the coin was fabricated, and certain markings indicate past Halatier stock ownership. Each time a new coin crosses my path, I ponder the journey it took over what may well have been the past few centuries, across national borders, and even beyond the broken coast and back again. But with all this said, something should be mentioned concerning the Scorn Empire. Even before their invasion of the West and their recent retreat back across the abyss, the Scorn were a fairly well-developed society, albeit with a simplistic economy. Consequently, even within itself, the Empire still needed to function in terms of trade. So it's strange to learn they have never used a standard coin. The closest one can find to a coin is a roughly cut gemstone of relatively low value. But it is what this represents which apparently serves as currency, and that is slave labour. This comes as a shock to Westerners for the most part, since even Cador outlawed serfdom centuries ago. But it is still a widely accepted institution throughout the Scorn Empire. Thus, the value Scorn merchants attach to goods or services is quantified by how much slave labour is required to produce said goods or carry out said service. To me, and no doubt many others, it is quite impenetrable as a currency, and I have long given up trying to assess an item's value in such terms, and not just because the worth in a slave's labour is a very complex thing indeed. But with regards to money in the West, things are once more uncertain with the reappearance of the Orgoth, and it is likely all currencies will see some measure of instabilities in the years ahead, not just the Cadoran Coltina. If they succeed in their goals, the Orgoth will see their currency in circulation in the Iron Kingdoms once more, if in a much more restricted manner, should the invaders' expansion continue to be far more limited than during their first effort, more than a millennium ago. More than 400 years have passed since the last time their coins traded hands for predetermined worth. During the interceding centuries, many Orgoth coins were plundered from ancient and accursed ruins, and traded back and forth for modest sums. But whether or not these might regain their original purpose and value, no matter to the Iron Kingdoms or the Orgoth themselves, remains to be seen. And as to the coins of what was once Ios, only time will tell whether this so-called Empire of the Eternal Dusk will make something more of them.